Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to be unpacking the really fascinating mechanics of democracy, and specifically, how it intersects with some deep-rooted social divisions. If you've ever wondered how the personal identities we carry out into the world actually shape the political systems governing us, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're focusing on explaining the core concepts of this chapter, breaking down exactly how societies handle differences and what that ultimately means for the health of a democratic nation. So let's dive right into this fundamental question that frames our entire analysis today. Think about this for a second. When a country is packed with different genders, religions, and castes, does that diversity inherently threaten the stability of its democracy? It's a heavy question, right? And a pretty common assumption is that difference equals division, and division equals instability. But as we explore the source material today, we are going to challenge that assumption head on. To figure that out, we're going to explore 5 key pillars: diversity and democracy, gender and politics, religion and communalism, caste and inequality, and finally, why identity politics acts as a double-edged sword. Starting off with Section 1, diversity in democracy. Now, bringing our social differences into politics is actually a healthy part of democracy because it allows marginalized voices to be heard. But where does politics actually begin? There's this brilliant question noted in the margins of our source text that asks why household work is even being discussed in a political science context. And it's a fantastic framing because it completely reveals our blind spots. Think about it. If politics is ultimately about power, then surely the power dynamics within a household, like who's doing the unpaid labor, should absolutely be considered political. Which brings us right to Section 2, gender and politics. What makes the gender divide so unique is that it's universal, yet it's almost entirely hidden in traditional studies of politics. You see, this divide isn't based on biology, even though many of us are raised to believe that. It's actually based on rigid social expectations and stereotypes. Boys and girls are brought up to believe that a woman's main responsibility is housework and raising children. And that creates a deeply entrenched public-private divide, where women are relegated to the private sphere of the home and men dominate the public sphere of paid work and politics. Let's put some numbers to this because the reality is pretty stark. Looking at time use survey data, women work an average of 7.5 hours a day compared to men's 6.5. But pay attention to where that time goes. Men spend 6 hours on income-generating work and just 30 minutes on household work. Women, on the other hand, spend a massive 5 hours on household work, and that work remains largely unpaid, totally undervalued, and basically invisible to the formal economy. Because this division of labor historically meant women had a minimal role in public life, feminist movements started springing up all over the globe. These movements, which were driven by anyone, man or woman, who believes in equal rights and opportunities, demanded an enhanced political, legal, and educational status. They pushed back hard against the idea that the private sphere wasn't political, and that led to some radical demands for equality in personal and family life as well. Tragically, though, despite all these movements, systemic discrimination is still heavily present. Our source material highlights a deeply alarming estimate. 50 million women are considered missing in South Asia due to various forms of violence and systemic discrimination. This manifests in some truly tragic ways, like a strong societal preference for sons, leading to sex-selective abortions. In some Indian states, that's actually caused the child-sex ratio to plummet below 850 girls per 1,000 boys. It is a very sobering reminder of why gender inequality is still a fiercely political issue. Okay, let's look at another student interjection from the text. They ask, I often crack jokes about people from one religion. Does that make me communal? It seems like a simple question, but it perfectly sets up our transition into the profound complexities of faith and politics, and how those casual prejudices can easily snowball into massive systemic issues. Section 3, religion and communalism. Unlike gender, religious differences dictate how entire communities interact within a nation. Things turn incredibly dangerous when religion morphs into communalism. Now, that's not just having religious beliefs. Communalism is expressing those beliefs in politics in exclusive, partisan ways, pitting groups against each other. It's when the beliefs of one religion are presented as inherently superior. The ultimate problem here becomes really acute when state power is actively used to establish the domination of one religious group over the rest. To really understand this politically, we need to know the baselines. According to the 2011 census, which is built on thorough self-reporting, Hindus represent 79.8% of India's population. Muslims represent 14.2%, Christians 2.3%, and other groups make up the remaining 2%. Grasping these actual demographic realities is absolutely essential before diving into the political representation of these communities. And looking at the actual demographic data allows us to address a really common political myth. You'll often hear narratives suggesting massive, impending demographic shifts that are going to completely overturn the current religious balance. But the Satcher Committee, which is a high-level expert group, estimates that the Muslim population proportion will only go up by a very small margin, just about 3 to 4%, over the next 50 years. So overall, the population balance is simply not likely to undergo any drastic changes. Recognizing the sheer danger of majoritarian dominance, the framers of the Indian Constitution were incredibly intentional about establishing a secular state to protect this delicate diversity. This means there is no official state religion, unlike Buddhism in Sri Lanka or Islam in Pakistan. The Constitution guarantees the freedom to profess any religion and strictly prohibits discrimination on religious grounds. It essentially acts as a legal firewall against communal politics. We have a sharp margin note from another student that brings us to a really fascinating debate. They ask, are we not promoting casteism by talking about caste? But the response, of course, is that ignoring a system of domination doesn't actually make it disappear. And that brings us to our final, and perhaps most uniquely Indian, social division. Section 4, Caste and Inequality. Unlike gender or religion, the caste system is a ladder-like hereditary hierarchy uniquely prevalent in India, traditionally sanctioned by ancient rituals. Now, explicit, formalized inequality like untouchability is officially outlawed by the Constitution, but you can't just erase history overnight. The effects of centuries of accumulated advantages for the upper castes and extreme disadvantages for Dalits and Adivasis continue to tightly grip modern access to education, resources, and wealth today. And that enduring legacy is highly visible right now. Extreme poverty directly correlates with traditional caste hierarchy. If we look at survey data from the turn of the century, nearly 46% of scheduled tribes and 36% of scheduled castes were living below the poverty line. Compare that to just 11.7% of Hindu upper castes. Yes, there are rich and poor in every group today, but the upper castes are still heavily overrepresented among the wealthy, while historically marginalized groups remain concentrated at the bottom of the economic ladder. Finally, Section 5, the double-edged sword. So, when we synthesize all this data on how gender, religion, and caste interact with the democratic process, we find that the political expression of social divisions is absolutely a double-edged sword. On one hand, identity politics provides crucial space for disadvantaged groups to demand power and gain much-needed access to decision-making. But on the flip side, exclusive attention to these identities can fracture a society. It can divert our attention away from broader, unifying issues like fixing poverty and driving development. And at its worst, it can lead to deep tension, conflict, and violence. I'll leave you with this final thought based on the chapter we've just explained. Do the benefits of giving a voice to these deep-rooted social divisions ultimately outweigh the risks of fracturing society further? It's the ultimate balancing act that every diverse democracy has to master. Thanks so much for exploring the source material with us on this explainer, and always keep questioning the structures around you.